Hi everyone, and welcome to the Say As It Is with Pete podcast series. I'm Pete, your host, and each week I will bring you some frank and honest conversations covering various topics from learning and development, apprenticeships, funding, HR, strengths, recruitment, ESG, well-being, ED&I, employability, and much, much more. So let's get this week's episode underway and say as it is.
Hey everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Say As It Is with Pete, and as always I'm your host Pete in this episode. So in this week's episode we're going to be talking, this week's episode is going to be split into two parts, part 1 and part 2. So part 1 is this week and part 2 is next week. Now part 1, or I should say, let me go back to basics because I'm jumping the gun slightly. So in this 2-part episode, that sounds better. In this 2-part episode, I'm going to be talking about TUPE. Now, TUPE is something that happens in the UK, and I want to do 2 parts of this. One for the employer, which is part 1, and then one for the employee, which is part 2, and that's the employee exiting the current employer and entering the new employer. But this episode is also to those employees that are exiting and those employees that are coming in. So one going out, one coming in. Now, TUPE happens quite a lot, and in the job that I do, TUPE is quite regular, and it comes up quite a lot when businesses have lost their contracts and we've tendered for it and we've won it. So we've just gone through, the company I work for, we've just gone through 24 TUPE transfers, which is probably the biggest in a month and a half time frame. So it's been absolutely crazily busy. Still slightly miffed how we have managed to take so many hotels on one day, but hey, it's a challenge. But we seem to get there somehow, and I'm still miffed. And even with my team that I have, which is very small, we still seem to pull off what we can pull off. Now, what does TUPE stand for? If you haven't heard of it before, TUPE actually stands for I had it here 2 seconds ago because I'm reading my notes. TUPE is the transfer of undertakings, protection of employment regulations, and it was designed to protect employees if a business in which they are employed changes hand. So I'm going to give you some information about TUPE. So under TUPE, the new employer, so that's the transferee, is required to take on the employees of the previous employer. So the transferor, with the same terms of conditions of employment, as well as employee liability information, so ELI, is the when a get my words out, a bit tongue twisted today. So when somebody is taking on new business and somebody's transferring it out, so the outgoing company should provide something called an ELI. So an ELI stands for Employer Liability Information, and this gives them clear information to the new employer, or the one that is transferring or having the employees transfer to them. So the Employer Liability Information, or the ELI, is information that the outgoing employer must provide to the new employer. So this information should include the 6 of the following, or all 6 of these really, and that should be the identity and age of the employees being transferred, information about their employment contract, so whether it's full-time, part-time, casual, whatever it may be, contracted hours, so if it's 16 hours, 20 hours, 30 hours, 40 hours, details of any disciplinary actions taken within the last 2 years, details of any grievances raised within the last 2 years, information about any legal actions taken by the employees against the employer, if obviously again within the 2 years, and then details of any collective agreements that affect the terms and conditions of employment. So this could be things like, health insurance, all those kind of things, but it's also any outstanding holiday information, it's the rate of pay, or if they're salaried, what their salaries are, and then the information must be provided at least 28 days before the transfer takes place. This is to help the new employer understand their obligations and the rights of employees that they are inheriting. So this is essential for ensuring that employees are treated fairly and that their terms of employment are preserved and protected in the transfer. So look, I've done so many of these TUPE transfers in my current employer and with other previous employees, and I want to aim this at employers, because look, guys, I'm going to tell you this, frank and honest. You've got to wise up and get a lot more smarter, and you've got to be a lot more bloody professional, because I've seen some 2Ps that have gone absolutely tits up. And this is because the exiting employer, yes, although they're frustrated that they've lost the contract, are rude, arrogant, can also sometimes be very disruptive and delay things and take their time and say, oh, I didn't know that information, or sneaky and give pay rises and adjust the terms, conditions of employment, get them all done before they transfer over, and then produce the ELI a few weeks before, going, oh, here they all are. Well, guys, come on, this is not a playground. We are professionals. We are employers. We need to act professionally. Now, 2P is handled. So once a contract has been won, for example, and you are then having to transfer your team out to the new employer, you know, there is a consultation period. There is that 28-day consultation period between the employees from the moment they're notified until the day of transfer, or takeover day, as it should be known. So you have 28 days, and in that 28 days, the employees have several meetings. One from the existing employer advising that unfortunately they have lost the contract, but all the employees will be transferred to the new employer with all their terms, conditions and everything protected, and that these employees then have an option whether to stay with the existing employer or transfer with the new one. So you have to give that employee the option. And as the exiting employer, if you do have other opportunities within the area that you can move those people to, fantastic, offer it to them. If not, then they've got an option whether to transfer across, stay with the existing and move somewhere else, or end their employment. It's up to them, because the employee, and we'll find this out on episode 2, needs to be well informed. But also in this episode, you need to make sure you do inform everybody on either side, because the exiting employer, and I've seen this in some instances where the exiting employer can be so spiteful. Why? You're telling people, oh, you don't want to transfer with them, it's not good enough, you know, they're not going to treat you, you're going to lose your jobs. No. Sometimes there's a lot of scaremongering, because obviously the exiting employer is quite, you know, annoyed, frustrated, and they're upset, and they're going to lose people and everything else. So they tend to kind of stir the pot, and there's no need to. And 2P is handled by HR. So as soon as the contract is won, those involved in winning that contract should transfer everything across to HR, for HR to then conduct that initial first 2P meeting, and then there's subsequent weekly meetings over that 28 days, giving more information to the employees and answering any questions that the employees have. Now, the key thing about this ELI data is, if you know as an employer, as the exiting employer, that you've lost that contract, be smart, be professional. Don't be an arse. Have all that information ready on the ELI. Now, there are ELI templates out there that you can download and use, but as long as you're putting all the employees' information, first name, last name, email, contact number, job title, pay rate, contract term, so as I said, part-time, full-time, fixed hours, any holidays, any disciplinaries, grievances, any like that on that information, that then helps the new employer prepare better. Because when we go into the meetings as a new employer, we're very scarce on the information we got. We don't know how many people there are. We don't know everything about contracted hours, pay rates, things like that. So we don't know that information, and sometimes that's quite frustrating, because when we go to our first 2P meetings, the employees are asking, so is my rate of pay going to change? What's my terms and conditions going to change? And some of those we can answer. Rate of pay we can't, because we may not have that information. So as the exiting employer, this is my advice to you. Once you know that you're potentially losing that contract, but that contract is potentially up for grabs, start collating your ELI information right away. Be smart. Plan ahead, because it will save you time. Have all that information ready. You may still keep the contract, you may not lose it, but do you know what? It's good to have that ELI data ready to go if needed. Once you lose that contract and you know you haven't been successful, and that's a shame, then you've got that data already sitting there ready to go to provide to the new employee, or the new employer, sorry. And that new employer and you are going to work together. So, you're going to have to send copies of their contracts anyway, and, their employee files to the new employer anyway. So, start putting those together as well to be ready to transfer them across. Because some exiting employers, as I say, are so spiteful and so idiotic in the way that they handle this. It's ridiculous. And I've seen it, not necessarily at the current employer, but I've seen it at previous employers, and I've heard about it from previous employers and people that work as HR professionals, that there is a lot of exiting employers that are very spiteful for no reason. And look, guys, you're HR professionals. What are you doing? I don't understand. Why be that way? And sometimes they hold out the information until the last hour and like the last few days before the 2P transfer takes place, and it's crazy. And in that time, from the moment that the exiting employer has had that meeting and said, look, we've lost the contract, this is what's going to happen, on the same day the new employer comes in and welcomes them and does their presentation and tells them about their company and tells them that their rights are protected and they don't lose anything, and if there is a adjustment or change to their terms, and that could be that they're currently on monthly pay, but now they're going to 2 weekly pay. The holiday year is no longer January to December, it's April to March. So those things might change, which then you're obviously going to have to tell them that their pay in the holiday year changes and that their pension provider would change, but everything else would stay the same. But if it's then on those subsequent weekly meetings that the individuals get a chance to say whether they want to transfer or not, and if they do, then the new employer is going to be registering those individuals on a weekly basis to say, okay, let's take your ID, let's get you registered on the system, let's get all your details so we can pay you, and then we're ready to go. They're not having to obviously sign any new contracts because it's protected, obviously, but it helps that process. So why that 2P meetings are going on between the HR team or the ops team, whoever who is supporting with those weekly 2P meetings or consultation meetings, and answering any questions that the new employees have, the exiting employer should be having that ELI data ready and have started to collect all the employee files electronically ready to send, because this shows that you're professional and that you're doing the job correctly. Because, as I say, there are some that don't bother to the last minute, the last hour to send that information, and it's so frustrating and so confusing because it doesn't help anybody. So employers need to be professional at all times, and if you're a HR professional listening to this, you should be professional all the way. And if you haven't done 2P before and it's the first time that you're doing it, where you're being told as an organization you're outsourcing a department, then it's good to have a 2P presentation ready. Now there's two parts of this for an exiting employer. An exiting employer can be an exiting employer and a new employer. So sometimes you might have your let's say your IT department. So your IT department you have in-house at the moment. Outsource that to another provider. So that's going to go on 2P, right? You then decide after a year or so that it isn't working, and you're going to move your IT team back in-house. So you've 2P'd them out, you're now going to 2P them back in. The same process follows. So, their contracts are always going to be the same. And I've seen employees that have 2P'd 3 or 4 times on their original agreement all those years ago, and it's just 2P, 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 2P. Everything has stayed the same, apart from probably the pension, when they're paid, their weekly pay and their salary has changed, because obviously their salary is increased rather than decreasing, but it's increased. They may have an extra 1 or 2 days holiday due to length of service. They're now paid 2 weekly, not monthly, and they're no longer with, say, AXA for the pension. They're with Nest or Penfold, for example. So that's it. But all their other terms, conditions, sick pay, everything else is all still the same. So it's key to make sure that if you're the employer that is, outsourcing your team, or you were the employer and you've lost a contract and you're now giving these team members to another employer, that you have everything ready, and always be prepared with a presentation for exiting employees and a presentation for employees coming back in or coming on board. So it's always key to have that. So have an ELI template ready to go, have your 2P exit and your 2P entry, exit and entry, 2P entry in, have a mobilisation plan of what you need to do over that 28 days for exiting, or like your exit plan for the 28 days. But if you're in taking people on, then have a mobilisation plan of what you're doing over the 28 days to get ready to take everybody on, have everything ready for what you need. So IT, it could be, say IT equipment, L&D, HR processes, health and safety that needs to be done, any recruitment, things like that. Have it ready. Now, if you find, for example, you are the employer that is saying goodbye to the team, but you've managed to retain some of them, fantastic. What you have to be aware is that the new employer is going to be recruiting for those missing people. So it's always key to just let people know that during the 28-day consultation, if they do see job adverts going up, it's not to replace anybody in the team. It's only to replace those that may stay with you rather than transferring over. So if anybody doesn't transfer over, then there may be job adverts going out to replace those people to support and keep the team at what it is. So you just have to make them aware of that, because people may see adverts out for jobs and they're going, but I'm being replaced. You're not being replaced. It just means that those adverts may go out, because if some of you don't transfer across and you stay with us, then that's great. But obviously the new employer needs to fill those missing positions, so they will advertise to fill those gaps. So you have to be honest with them and open, and follow the process. Look at ACAS. They've got some great information on 2P processes and what should be done. But it's key to make sure that you, as the employer, if you're the exiting or the entry employer, that you are professional to the last moment. Do not be bitchy. Do not be complicating things. Do not be a distraction. Do not drag your feet. Show how professional you can be. Because trust me, it's a small world, and I've met people that have really screwed up 2Ps because they were angry or kind of pissed off that they'd lost contracts or they were losing a team. That what they don't realise is that their actions, there's always a consequence. So their actions and the way they behaved, I've met these people further down the line and said to them, what were you doing? Oh, I was just really pissed off that day. Yeah, well, no shit, Sherlock, basically. You did that, and it was really unprofessional, and that really shows your behaviour and your character as a HR professional. And if I was a HR person employing somebody like you and I knew you'd done that, I probably wouldn't have employed you, because there's no professionalism and there's no sense of responsibility or professional accountability. It's just you took things personally and you made it difficult. Not acceptable. That's not what we do. So yes, be professional, be clever, be smart. So as I say, when you have those situations, get your ELI data ready. So even if you know you might be tendering for the businesses up for tender, have everything ready. ELI ready, employee data or employee files ready, have everything ready to go, because the smarter you are, the better you are, and that's the best way to be. Because if you suddenly lose it, you're having to run around and get all that data, and it's absolutely chaotic because you're trying to pull all that information in, and it takes its time. So be planned. Always plan ahead. Plan to succeed. Don't plan to fail. So as the either the transferring employer or the receiving employer, both need to be professional. I'm not saying it just because of the people exiting, but also those that are coming in. Be professional. Do not be arsy towards the exiting employer. Be supportive. Show the support. Show how you can work with each other. Now, you be professional in your emails. If you're asking information like what's the pension rate that you're paying at the moment, what's the employee rate, anything like that you need to know, make sure you're asking it as clearly as you can. If you are wanting some templates or things like that, then do reach out to me at pete@creativemind.zone, and I can provide you with some of those templates and information about the best ways to handle a 2P situation, whether it's out or in. And just remember, these are employees, these are people that we're dealing with. Yes, we may have our own personal views and preferences on, losing a contract, gaining a contract, but we've got to remember that we're dealing with human beings at the end of the day, people's lives, people's jobs. So don't try and think, oh, I'm just going to mess this all up, or I can't be bothered, this is pointless, or you got to show that you have a caring side. And if you work in HR, you should have empathy and you should have compassion. And if you don't have empathy or compassion, what are you doing in HR? I raised the question. Come do Strength Scope with me and we'll see if you do have empathy and compassion. But yes, just be professional. And I think that's the point of this episode, is as employers, when you are dealing with 2P, whether you are the employer that is saying goodbye or the employee that is saying hello, or the employer that is saying hello, that you do it in the right way, not the wrong way. Be planned and prepared. Get everything ready. I'm not saying that you are going to be 2Ping out departments here, there and everywhere every day, but it happens. And especially in my industry, it happens quite a bit. So we are pretty old hats at it and experts at this by now. With 23, 24 2Ps in the last month and a half, I think we were well underway for that. But look, the main thing is that you understand that you make the process as simple and easy for yourself as a HR professional, and you make it as simple and as easy for the employee, because they're the ones that count. They need as much information, much comfort, much compassion, as much empathy, and they need to be reassured that they are being taken care of and nothing gets affected, because there's lots of confusion, especially when they find out. Yes, it's a big shock, there's tears, there's emotions, but I think it's that important thing to say to them, look guys, do not worry. If the things that change, it may be that your holiday year might change, your pension provider might change, and also your holiday period might change, but nothing else is affected. You explain to them when the last day is. You explain to them that they have the option to stay with you and apply for other roles, or stay with you and you can move them elsewhere, or put them in a different department, wherever it may be. And just say to them, you've got 28 days, so it's their decision at the end of the day, but also to listen to the new provider that's coming in, or the new employer, and see what the new employer says, so they get from the current and the new, and they can make their decisions. They can ask you questions as the exiting employer, and they can ask all the questions they want for the new employer. But again, collaborate together, work together as organizations. You need to make that transition as smooth as possible for everybody, not only for yourself, not only for the new employer, but also for the employees. And the employees is key. It's all about our people, right? Because in the world of HR, if we're not about people, well, what are we doing in HR? Yeah? Hello? Wake up and smell the coffee. It's all about the people. Show a little empathy and compassion. But anyway, listen guys, that's basically it, what I've got to say for employers. And yet, look, I've been a bit harsh on it because, I've experienced it both sides. I've gone through 2P before. I've been through a good 2P and I've been through a bad 2P in the past. it depends on the individual and how well you're planned and prepared. And you've got to be professional every step of the way. Do not be nasty or arsey or anything like that. Show that you are a professional. As I say, it will come back and bite you if you're not. Either side, whether you're the new employer, old employer, or vice versa. It doesn't matter. The way you act professional shows who you are as an individual, and shows that you can manage this in a professional HR approach, like you all should do. So yes, look, be professional, do this correctly, plan ahead, get ready. If you want any information about how to create a 2P presentation for employees who are exiting or coming in, or if you want a ELI template, let me know. If you want to know how you can communicate with your teams a bit more and how you can plan over that 28 days to make either the exit or the entry as smooth, easy for you as an employer for the employee, then reach out to me, as I say, pete@creativemind.zone, and I'll be more than happy to help you with that. Now, I hope that has given you some key insights and information, and I've said it as it is, so there we are. But also, and I apologise for my tongue-twisting moments, because sometimes my mind is running before my mouth goes. Typical me. But what I will say as well is in next week's episode, I'm going to be talking about the employee. So how the employee receives this, how the employee is processing the information from both the employer who is exiting and the employer that is coming in. So the out and the in, and how that employee should handle themselves in a professional manner as well, but giving some advice and tips to the employee. Because look, as I said, I've gone through lots of 2Ps. I've seen them and I've seen how they work, and I've seen how the team members react. And it's more about being transparent and honest and providing that information. So I'm going to give you the perspective from a employee's point of view. So although this episode, part 1, is focused on the employer or employers making sure they do what's right and following best practice, as I say, the next episode will be some advice and guidance for the employees. And then if you ever have an employee going out or going in for a 2P, then maybe you'll share that episode with them. So look, guys, that's the end of this week's episode. It's not a long one. It's very simple and it's very common sense. Okay, be professional, be prepared, and make the transition as seamless as possible from both sides, whether you're going out or you're coming in with employees. Always remember, you can go to the ACAS website and find out more information about 2P processes. And as I say, you can always contact me for templates in regards to emails, ELIs, or even presentations. So happy days. Now guys, you can always go back and listen to this episode and previous episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music and RSS.com, or wherever you get your podcasts from. And as I say, next week's episode focuses on the employee and all the information that they need to know to make it a little bit easier for them during a 2P process. Now, if you've enjoyed this episode and you want to get involved and talk a little bit more about 2P or any other HR practices and processes in the world of the HR function, please feel free to reach out to me at pete@creativemind.zone, or slip into my LinkedIn DMs, or you can find me on Instagram, Otter_Pete, and then you can also drop me a message in there, and I'd be happy to get you onto a podcast and have a frank and honest conversation around more HR topics. But until next week, guys, enjoy the rest of this week. It's not going to be as sunny as warm as I wanted it to be. It's going to be a bit nippy, a little bit of rain. So get your rain jackets out, be prepared for a little bit more gusty wind, and enjoy your week.